clear.
You are hired as a representative of, we are your constituents. You are a representative of us as Shimer College. Do you not see it as a conflict with that if you can't put aside your opinions and represent us as we would like to be represented?
Well, I represent, meaning literally to the board, represent, meaning let the board know.
I understand what that means. However,
I will do that. That's my point. I'll do that.
But if you insist that as a college we should change our mission statement, even though there is near consensus throughout the community, which does not happen all the time. That is going against what we have hired you for, what you are representing.
So that's not what you hired me for.
Yes, it is. Look, you had.
It's a different right. The question is, in what does representation consist? This is, in fact, one of those perennial questions that we study the great books to try to get some clarity on. If any of you are familiar with Edmund Burke's letter to the sheriffs of Bristol, they make just that argument.
I'm sure. It's a really good answer.
They make just that argument.
Stop talking in circles because
It's not a circle. No, it's not a circle. I'm trying to base our discussion in the great books. As a great books college, I think
even
that
aside from any like representative theory, like any sort of theory of representation, I mean I would just call it bad management. You're alienating your entire population.
Which is fine if you see my relationship to the students as one of manager to employees. I don't.
The holy one.
You're administering your rules. You are creating a rule, enforcing it, and imposing it upon the student populace. How does that not resemble a managerial?
I see my job as a trust.
Okay, and you completely violated it, but you would be if you changed the Shimer mission statement.
Do you know how trusts work?
No.
If you're the trustee, if you are the executor of a trust, that means that the person that means that you're supposed to be protecting us.
I think that I am.
We
And you're also supposed to
I know that you don't agree.
The person who owns the trust belongs.
He's already out of the cave, so.
He's leading us.
Yeah, how do you not see this as turning from like an aristocracy to tyranny?
Tell me how it's a tyranny.
Well, do what you want regardless of how you feel.
You're only doing your opinion.
I know. You know, tyranny is such a serious term that.
Yeah, this is pretty serious.
Serious people, I know, serious people like us probably shouldn't throw it around unless we know what it means.
Well, I'm pretty sure we read Plato's Republic. I think we know what
it just means fascism just means
God.
That's not what tyranny means.
No, tyranny means when one person rules, contrary is not.
Yes. And how is this not that?
No, it doesn't.
I don't want to get you are
I'll tell you what. No, I hear that. Can we all agree? Go and read Burke's letter to the sheriffs of Bristol and let's have another discussion about that.
No.
Now, in the name of openness, you don't want to read.
Well, on the
I have more pressing things.
On the topic of representation, if I could just ask, so you mentioned that you do represent interests, if you will. You take direction from the board as your administerial position is that of president, and you're hired at the will of the board.
No, what I said was.
No, I'm stating that that's your job description, more or less. I mean, not job description, but you are hired by the board. And you execute, to some extent, their will in administering the college and so forth.
Students and faculty are members, yes.
And at the moment, again, you have what appears to be a very politically tilted board that's blocking the nomination of 6 community representatives who are not of their political bent. and this is prior to the vote on changing the mission statement. So blocking major donors and long-standing community members seems like a dereliction of duty on the part of the board. How is that fair representation of the community, do you think?
Again, I'm sorry, I just have to correct you. They weren't blocked. The motion was tabled and is going to be reconsidered by the board in 3 weeks. No one's been blocked. Now, I don't serve on the nominating committee, but what I have learned is that it was not blocked. It was tabled. In fact, my understanding is that some of the members of the nominating committee are coming in early to meet some of the prospective board members.
Have any of the board nominees ever been tabled before?
Well, I know one who's been blocked, but I don't know if anyone's been tabled. Well, I thought, I'm just basing it on what Mary Ellen said about
No,
Mary
he
Ellen.
withdrew, citing pressures at the time.
Okay. Did he withdraw because he thought he was going to be accepted by the board?
You know, I'm not friends with Larry Arn, you have to ask him.
So does that strike you as unusual, the tabling of these nominees prior to such an important vote?
Again, I'm not on the nominating committee.
I didn't ask if you were on the nominating committee. Does it strike you as odd?
Without knowing
Such an important vote.
Without knowing the details, I don't know whether it's usual or unusual.
I mean, it strikes me as
How about-
as though it's never happened before.
Right, that,
Yeah.
does that not strike you as
It's
unusual?
not usual.
Well, the board meeting is just a couple weeks away, so I think this will be resolved.
Does it seem significant to you that 4 of the 7 members of the nominating committee are of that recent influx of politically minded individuals?
Again, I'm not on the nominating committee, so once we know whether or not those members are going to serve on the board or not, then we can have a real discussion of this. But in the absence of facts, it's hard to theorize about
Well,
this.
you've had your opinions, as you've said about the mission statement, why can't you have an opinion?
Yeah, and
Because-
you base those on history,
because
so
I
you
like-
can't base these on history.
I like my opinions to be based on some facts that I know, and I don't know anything about this.
Like Shimer classes and what happens in them?
I think I've said in enough Shimer classes to be
You're wrong.
very impressed by what happens.
I do
And
not
to
vote
be
for
a
this.
better,
Yeah.
descriptor of it than anyone who's
Are you
been there.
are you